IT. So I like to use my like interview time kind of for stuff that's like weird to ask during like press conferences and stuff, more about like your journey and kind of where you are.
Sure.
So obviously you've made a lot of content over the years, so apologies if stuff is repeated, but
you're good.
We'll start with just kind of like for the record and to help like base some later questions. Like what is your goal like in esports, like a must do before you retire? Like what keeps you competing still?
Honestly, I thought that the first world championship was a must-do before I retire, and now it feels like the second one is. So I feel like it's just there's gonna be something always. For me right now, I don't know. I feel like I'm growing as a player, and that's kind of all I can ask for. I try not to set super high expectations for myself or like super high goals because then it just feel unattainable. Obviously, I would love to play in co-ed. I would love to compete in VCT, but it's not something that I'm like mad about if I don't ever do it. I'm just trying to be like the best teammate, best player I can be, to be honest.
Cool. And that's kind of a great transition into the next question. I did dive into some of those old content pieces, like your C9 White player spotlight video from like 2 years ago.
I was so cringe. I was just a baby.
No, you and Mel, it was so cute. But you talked about how like when you were signed to C9 White, one of the reasons why you went with them over other orgs was like they never treated you like a female team and encouraged you guys to play in co-ed events. Do you think that's kind of how now reflected in your mindset about esports and some of your goals kind of with co-ed participation?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like C9 was such a good like stepping stone for us because they actually were super supportive of us playing in co-ed, where I feel like at the time there was a lot more orgs and I feel like a lot of them had no expectation for their female team. They didn't encourage them to go play in co-ed, and I feel like that made them kind of lack and made their skill ceiling lower because they weren't out there literally getting shit on by VCT players in random like weekend tournaments. But we were able to like watch those games back and improve a lot faster because we were getting owned by much better players. So I feel like that definitely helped me grow a lot as a player personally, and I feel like we look forward more to playing in co-ed events at home than playing in GC at this point, just because it's like GC, it's like right now our regional, we're playing the same team every time. So it's kind of like, well, this again, you know what I mean? Like we are not playing any new talent right now. So we are looking forward to playing, you know, Mr. Funhaver events and like other small co-ed events for sure.
Dang, you're literally answering future questions.
I'm sorry.
No, I love that. Because it means like I'm like making the right storyline, you know? But I guess this is kind of then similar to one of the questions, which is like the state of NA Game Changer specifically is rough compared to other regions, right? Like only 2 signed orgs, no LAN. Why do you think that is a problem for the North American region, and what do you think like has to be done maybe to remedy it?
Honestly, I have no idea. You gotta ask a scientist at this point because I really don't know.
Hey, you were majoring in CS.
True. Well, you actually did your fact checking. Wow,
that was in the C9 video.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like partially it has to be just because like in EU the cost of living is lower, and so like the monthly wages are lower for players. Like it's easier to assign teams when you don't have to pay them nearly as much. I feel like also, I don't know, maybe our GC scene is just kind of like stagnated a bit. Like I feel like there's not a lot of new talent that are like grinding to be, you know, insane players right now. Honestly, I don't have like a really solid answer for why, but I wish there was like more orgs in the scene, 100%.
The EU insight was really nice.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes then again to why like maybe there might not be new talent in Game Changers. So, and like some of the players you used to play alongside. So like out of the original like C9 squad, right? You and Mel are the only ones still competing in Game Changers, with Jazzy going to collegiate and Bab and Katsumi playing like in those co-ed tier 3 and challengers like solely. Do you think this is evidence of Riot's view of the GC scene being successful as a segue to better competition? Or do you think it's kind of the opposite, where players in GC feel stuck without upward movement?
I think it is like proof of GC being successful. I mean, Bob was the first female player in challengers. Obviously, we can just look at Floor's gameplay. We know she's going to get signed to a VCT team. That's just kind of obvious at this point. Jazzy going to collegiate. I think that she was enjoying GC. I think the issue for Jazzy was that there was no signed teams for her to join because FlyQuest was a full roster. She was playing with Passion Project at the time. So there was no like upward trajectory for her at the time. But collegiate is another stepping stone to get to VCT, get to challengers if that is her goal. So yeah, I think Game Changers as an idea is super successful, and I feel like we're finally seeing players like Bob, players like Floor like about to move up in Valorant for sure.
Yeah, my non-canon belief is that main event 2 floor was subbed out because they were trialing GCC teams.
Hey,
No leaks. But that's my belief. I was like, this is lining up with the timelines very well.
Maybe.
But speaking of moving up in the world, obviously Riot announced this year that the GCC winners get a champs spot. And I talked to Mimi, for example, with G2 yesterday, and she mentioned how their focus will shift away from GC a little bit, they're going to boot camp for that instead of GC. Would you think that'll be the same for Shopify Rebellion, that if you earn that spot in Challengers, your focus will shift more to that than the GCC?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the expectation out of our org will be. Are they going to want us to compete in Challengers or compete in Game Changers, and what they want our focus to be on, because at the end of the day they are paying us to play in Game Changers.
Yeah.
But at least for us personally, I know that everyone is going to want to shift the focus to Challengers, and to kind of increase our level of play and try and be a good Challengers team versus focusing on being the best GC team. Obviously our focus is always just to be the best team that we possibly can be, but I feel like having Challengers teams to test our skill will be a lot more telling than playing against Game Changers teams.
Nice. And I kind of asked this as well to Mimi. They said they're already doing things obviously to prepare for if they get that challenger spot. How are you in Shopify Rebellion ensuring that if you get that opportunity, you're not gonna kind of waste it, especially as Riot is doing that for the first time?
To be honest, every day we're grinding. We work super, super hard. So if we do get that spot, it will just kind of be a seamless transition for us in the sense that we're already working super hard, so that will not change. I think our focus will just shift to trying to get our level back up to a Challengers play level, because in scrims at home we do very, very well in scrims, especially against other Challengers teams. So I think at Game Changers champs and just in Game Changers tournaments in general, we tend to play to the level of our opponent instead of playing to how we normally do in scrims. So I think the only change will just be shifting from playing against GC teams to playing against Challengers teams and shifting our level of play.
Nice. And the last two questions are kind of less related to the challengers and player progression. The first one is kind of unique to, I feel you and Mel, in that some of the big orgs you've been a part of have had a pretty big focus on content, especially. How has it been balancing kind of content and playing versus other orgs that might not have that factor? And do you think it's important and has kind of developed your image as a player?
Oh, definitely. I think content is super, super important, especially for any aspiring player. To be able to make content is such a big, stepping stone into getting recognized. For me personally, as far as streaming goes, my internet at home is just horrible. I don't have fiber. I literally I have packet loss constantly. Even in practice is an issue. So for me personally, making my own content is kind of difficult, but we do get our org support and an amazing media team to be able to come to our boot camps and come to our houses on C9 like they did, to be able to film content for us. So being able to have that to just naturally build our brands is really, really nice. And I honestly, I really enjoy doing content. It's fun.
The irony that AT&T sponsored the C9 thing. I just realized that.
It's not available where I live. I don't
Me
even.
neither. Literally, you walk across the street and it's available.
Yes, I live in the deep woods. There's nothing. There's literally nothing.
Cool. And then this will be the last question for the interview, and it's kind of a nice encapsulation. So you and Mel have talked about how your champs run the last time in Berlin with C9 White was good for humbling you and making you more mature and realize you have to work harder. Do you think that experience or event has developed you the most as a player, or is there another time or person that comes to mind that's had a similar impact?
I think that chance where we lost definitely was a big one. That was a slap in the face, genuinely. We had spent the last 2 years being the most dominant team in Game Changers by far across all regions. I don't think any other region won every single one of their regional champs. So I feel that was a big one. Outside of that, I just feel for me personally, developing as a player, I feel my confidence has always been kind of low. And I feel today I had a rougher performance than I normally do. And I feel me 2 years ago, or me even 1 year ago, I would have been sobbing after the game, even if we won, at how bad I played. But because I was able to just keep my cool mentally and try and get myself back in the game and not succumb to being oh man, I'm 0-8 right now, guys. I was able to just chill. I feel that proves to myself that I have grown as a person and a player. It's also really nice that we have a sports psychologist on standby that works with SR. I don't know what I would do without him. He's the best. So yeah, I feel we've just grown a lot, and I feel going through trials and tribulations over the last 2 years since we lost has also just grown us a lot as players.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And that
Thank
will
you.
conclude this interview.
Yay.